welcome to Atypical the podcast with me, Simon, he, they. I'm today on my own for a very short little, I suppose, vignette, and I just wanted to talk about today being International Non-Binary People's Day. It is, of course, the 14th of July, and this day has certainly been recognised as, like I say, International Non-Binary People's Day since at least 2012. I'm told the date is chosen because it falls at the midpoint between International Women's Day on the 8th of March and International Men's Day on the 19th of November. Now, we here on Atypical are mostly we all identify, I should say, as neurodivergent, so that's autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, etc. But most of us also have differing sexual or gender identities. So, like I said, I currently identify as he, they, and other members of the team also have different gender and sexual identities, and it's not for me to discuss that now. We will have a much more detailed and long conversation about gender and about sexuality, and indeed probably the overlaps with neurodivergence at a later stage. And it's probably going to be multiple things. And it's one of those ones I'd like to get different people in on and get different voices and lived experiences. Anyway, that's not what today is about. Today, like I say, International Non-Binary People's Day. But what does being non-binary mean? Now, so being non-binary, sometimes referred to as enby, is very simply an umbrella term that includes all people who do not identify wholly as a man or a woman. And there are many ways to be non-binary. And these include identifying as both a man and a woman, somewhere in between, or having no gender at all. And a few of the most common non-binary identities are agender, which means either not having a gender or being gender neutral; bigender, which is having aspects of more than one gender, either at different times or even at the same time; gender fluid is a gender identity that changes over time; and gender queer is, again, another umbrella term for non-binary identities that can be used as a gender itself as well. Now, somebody did ask me if there is a difference, or rather, is non-binary the same as trans? Now, no. So while the term trans generally encompasses people whose gender is not the same as, or does not sit comfortably with, the sex they were assigned at birth, some non-binary people don't see themselves as trans. It's always important to respect the language someone uses to define themselves. And so trans people may describe themselves using one or more of a wide variety of terms, including transgender, transsexual, genderqueer, gender fluid, non-binary, gender variant, trans man, trans woman, trans femme. There are so many different ones, and we will do an entire episode with some trans friends of ours who want to come and join us and talk about their own lived experience, gender identity, and of course their neurodivergences as well. And I'm really looking forward to being able to find a day when we can record that, and I will very much leave this discussion to them. But let's go back to non-binary. So, like I said, it's an umbrella term. Now, non-binary people can feel that their gender identity and gender experience involves being both a man or a woman, or is fluid, or like I said, with, for example, agender, completely outside of that binary. And to understand gender identity versus gender expression, I think it's vital to understand the difference between the two. So gender identity refers to a person's clear sense of their own gender. This is not something which is governed by a person's physical attributes. Rather, gender expression is how you express yourself. And just like everyone else, non-binary people have all sorts of ways to express themselves and their identity. Now, they could present as masculine or feminine, or in another way, and this can change over time. But none of these expressions make their identity any less valid or worthy of respect. Now, one of my colleagues asked me earlier on how they could be a better ally to non-binary people, and I found this wonderful list, which it does sound very much common sense, but been put together by Stonewall here in the UK, and basically it's just 10 tips, things we can start thinking about. And without wishing to teach anyone to suck eggs, let's start with number 1. When you introduce yourself, use your name and your pronouns. Stating your pronouns reminds people that it might not always be immediately obvious what pronouns someone uses. And that follows on to the second of put your pronouns in your email signature or your social media profile. following on, we can stop addressing groups of people with binary language. Let's move away from using ladies and gentlemen and try more inclusive alternatives, such as just everyone. Hi, everyone. Let's get started. You can use words that define the relationship instead of the relationship and gender. So instead of saying my wife or my husband, my boyfriend, my girlfriend, use partner. Talk about your child or your children, your siblings. Also remember that not everyone is comfortable with gendered titles such as Miss or Mr. Titles are very rarely necessary now, let's be honest here. But sometimes you have to put one down, official documentation and so forth often requires them. And so a good practice, if you're able to, is to give people the ability to either add their own title or provide a good alternative such as mix, which is MX. You can start using the singular there instead of his and her in letters or emails or any kind of writing. When people do stuff, it's important to remember that not everyone necessarily uses he and she pronouns. And so being respectful of them, again, we're going back to the they and them. Like I say, lots of these are repetitive. It's just about removing genderization within your language until someone tells you, no, I want to be identified as male, female, whatever it may be. And to be honest, using the pronoun they is really useful when you just don't know the person. You don't know their gender identity. You don't know how they want to be referred to. Again, if you're in a position to change any kind of workplace policies or documents, or even just in your regular emails or messages with friends, using they or them instead of he and she can help people. It can help people feel more included. It is more inclusive to non-binary people and to trans people. So it's just a nice, simple, easy thing to do. It costs you nothing and it could mean the world to someone else. And lastly, I think when we are highlighting LGBTQ plus people in, let's say, a work event or a group or whatever, if you know of or can bring forward some non-binary role models as well, that is always, always going to be appreciated by someone. Really, it all just comes down to being nice to people, being respectful, and thinking, how would I want to be treated in that situation? Anyway, I've probably rambled on for some time now, and like I say, we will have a much more in-depth conversation about gender and sexual identities and all of those interesting things at a later point. I just felt it was important to share today, and with all of my enby siblings and friends and people out there, that today is a day just to recognise who you are. And hopefully someone will listen to this and realise that they can put their pronouns on their emails, so they can be a little bit more open with who they are. And also, perfectly reasonable to say, I don't know who I am yet. I'm exploring that. That's what I'm doing. I don't know who I am, but I'm exploring. And having people around me who are open and supportive has meant the world to me. Anyway, like I say, enough rabbiting on from me. Have a very pleasant afternoon all. Drink plenty of water this weekend. It's going to be hot. And we shall... Well, I was going to say see you. Again, I make this joke every time, don't I? Because I forget I've done it. We'll speak to you again next week with a fuller episode due to drop next Friday. Have a great week all. Bye for now.